Welcome back to the Eric Krown Crypto channel. Wishing you a happy healthy start to this nice macro Sunday morning, of which there's actually quite legitimately a lot of new things to be speaking about today as we prepare for the 1st of November, which is just a couple of days away now. So I suspect that today would be a really good time to be documenting and following up on the higher term timeframes, as that's where, of course, the macro moves typically are born upon. Anyways, other than that, I wanted to get right into it. Let's get right into it. All right, let's start it off right in over here. First with the short-term timeframes. Yesterday we were looking at likely a test of the top side of the range and then probably a rejection, of which I believe we're kind of getting right now. Something like this on the good old LARP lines, of which doesn't mean that necessarily has to come down exactly to these levels, can obviously come down more. But ultimately, if we are going to see continuation or if we are going to see a breakout either to the upside or the downside, very unlikely happens today, that being Sunday, probably happens Monday at the earliest, I would suspect, or at least when CME opens, which technically is at the end of Sunday here, at least for us in the Eastern Hemisphere. But ultimately, the breakout levels are still the same as before, about 20,950 to the upside, or if you just want to, round it up to 21,000, that's completely fine. And of course, to the downside, for the BULA's sake, as long as Bitcoin's closing 4 hours above the 20,250 pivot, which is also the 786 Fibonacci retracement right here, we still do have, or Bitcoin has, higher lows, and the BULA's still remain in the short-term power here within this consolidation. Of course, range resolutions have major implications here, both to the upside and the downside. In this case, anywhere above 20,950 on a 4-hour time frame closure minimum. Preferably when CME opens as well. Well, at that point, I would be looking for the next nice move to the upside on the short term, somewhere between about 21,300 to 21,500. And of course, to the downside, well, at that point, anywhere below basically the current low, especially below 20,000 bucks, but even on a 4-hour closure below about 20,200, this will very likely confirm a local high, thus confirming a higher term time frame lower high, and thus confirming hidden bearish divergence on the daily RSI, and would initiate very likely a major trap in this case. But for right now, as long as Bitcoin is above, of course, that pivot 20,200 especially, it's balls in the BULA's court. They do have short and medium term time frame trends on their side. And then the higher term time frames we're going to reference soon enough here have a lot of interesting things going on. So let's actually get into that right now. I want to kind of avoid speaking any more about the short term time frames because that's going to be more relevant for Monday, I suspect. And let's get into, where do I even want to start with this one? Okay, so let's get into the stats first. So I'm actually not going to go over the daily CME chart. Obviously, it's not trading today, but I do want to reference the 2-day and the 5-day and the statistics that are following them because those are building up for very likely a signal this coming week. Now, there are some economic catalysts this week. We do have, or this coming week, I should say, there's an FOMC meeting, I believe on the 3rd or 4th, and then there, of course, next week on the 8th is going to be the US midterms. And I think all throughout that time, there's going to be some economic data coming out as well. So a lot of catalysts, of which I expect that is going to be the spark that ignites a lot of these signals that carries us through not just November, but probably even December as well. So I wanted to start off with the 2-day time frame right here. This is on CME as well. And of course, CME is not trading tonight, but I did want to reference these stats to kind of speak about, the implications of this resolution. So first and foremost on the 2-day time frame, we're looking at a volatility versus momentum chart. This particular one is the volatility of stochastic momentum versus stochastic momentum. And basically, over the full history of CME, there have been many iterations of which when we do see a move by the volatility at extreme lows, what I'm trying to say, full contractions here. The expansion phase from these extreme lows has led to an average move of about 39.5% over the course of about 3.5 weeks or so on average. Stochastic also has been correct in getting the direction of that volatility expansion 80% of the time. So very, very high hit rate here. Not perfect, obviously. We're talking about statistics, not certainties in this case. It's not 100%, but still pretty fucking high as far as I'm concerned. And that would imply that as long as the 2-day time frame stochastic oscillator is pointed to the upside, well, the stats do favor the stats do favor the Boo laws. But here's the thing: just like when we were looking at the daily CME signature, it's not confirmed until we start to see volatility of stochastic momentum start to turn up. So this little indicator down here, when that starts to get a positive slope and above the critical zone, that's at the point when we can start to say, hey, this is confirmed. We can now apply those stats, and that's going to be the relevant direction, more often than not, I'd say, and probably a big fucking move. Looking at the average move right here, almost 40%. So let's say that it does come to the upside. We could be looking at, as higher than the summer highs, somewhere around 26 to 27,000 bucks, I suspect, coming into maybe the end of November here. Again, upon confirmation to the downside. Well, do you want me to talk about it? We can talk about it, certainly. 40% off the current high, assuming that it would turn into high, would put Bitcoin somewhere down around about $12,500 to $13,000 as well. So very, 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 very big pivots here. And we are as well witnessing one of the lowest levels of volatility here on the 2-day time frame. In fact, comparable only to 2020 July, where in that case, Bitcoin initiated this humongous bull run, basically from $10,000 to our current all-time high, essentially. So we are looking at an equal sort of reading on that. And yes, the lower that it stays, and the longer that it stays for low on particularly volatility indicators, does imply that the resolution of that will be even greater. So I suspect that this is going to be, dare I say, a big move. Anyways, moving on now, I wanted to get into the 5-day time frame. 5-day time frame over here. This one's probably a little bit more familiar. Again, volatility versus stochastic momentum, and volatility is going to be represented by the BBWP indicator in this case. On the 5-day time frame, we are starting to see it actually flatline. But again, anytime that we have seen it get below the 15 percentile marker in this case, I look at that as extreme lows. And the expansion phase from those extreme lows over the past 4 to 5 years has led to an average move of 42.35% over the course of about just over a month on average. And we can see right now that while the volatility component on this one, just like the 2-day time frame, is still yet to be confirmed, it is building up, obviously, and it can take a little bit longer. I mean, of course, this is a 5-day time frame. But once we do see the 5-day BBWP get a positive slope above the moving average and also above that 15 percentile marker, well, the signal will be confirmed, and then we can go apply those stats. Looking at the 5-day stochastic oscillator, it actually has been, and I want to be very clear with this, I do not expect this to continue for forever, but it actually has been perfect in getting the volatility expansion direction for the last 5 years. So again, just because it's been 100% over the past 5 years doesn't mean it's always going to be that way, but highly probable we will see a big move in that direction, obviously. So in this case, right now, the 5-day stochastic is pointed to the upside, and it will be remaining to the upside on the next period close, which is in 2 days. So I think like literally the November 1st or somewhere around there, as long as Bitcoin's closing above 18,950. So of course that seems, somewhat likely right now, I'd say. And if that does continue when volatility expansion actually does happen, then we'd actually be able to apply those stats to the upside in this case. But just like the 2-day time frame, it's not quite there just yet. It represents a potential, but not a confirmed indication here. So, the stats on this one are very similar in terms of average move to the 2-day time frame. It does theoretically take a little bit longer here. That's probably because this chart includes weekends, whereas the CME chart does not. And so, those same sort of numbers would apply just a little bit more. I mean, 43% versus like 40% is what we were looking at earlier. Sorry, 42%. So ultimately, we are looking again at several confluences on higher term timeframes that do suggest Bitcoin's probably either going to be above $25,000 or below basically $15,000 within the next by like early mid December, something like that would kind of make sense. So what other things can we do to get a bias on current, on the current direction? Well, a few things. First and foremost, I wanted to bring it back on over here. I wanted to bring it back onto the weekly time frame. And I think this is something that a lot of people have been looking at, and fair enough. I do actually think that this does hold some weight. A couple things, in fact. First and foremost, the weekly volatility represented by the BBWP indicator, again, is at multi-year lows. So we truly are looking at a macro move coming up here. On top of that, if you do want to be looking at the RSI, It is rather interesting on the weekly, as we do have a nice falling pizza in play. And this is a falling pizza that has been basically building for years now, which is likely, again, going to represent a macro move. And it is quite close, dare I say, to actually breaking out. A lot of the time, though, you will see a test to the top side of the barriers here, and then a rejection, sets in a higher low, and then sets up for the breakout. But ultimately, it will have a chance next week to confirm above the upper boundary of this, and that would very likely imply a move on the weekly RSI somewhere around at least the neutral zone, 50 reads, and I would even say quite likely somewhere around the edge of the bullish control zone in the low 60s here. So ultimately, this one's still not confirmed just yet. Obviously, I know that that everyone hates that, but at the end of the day, this can take longer, obviously. But for right now, this would still be building. The question is, are we going to get a rejection here, like sooner rather than or now, and then bust out, after going probably significantly down and creating some bullish divergence first, or is it going to just bust on through? Again, with the catalyst coming up this week, I suspect that we're very likely going to get we'll very likely get clarity on that situation. Anyways, further to the Bulaw's case, we do see that the weekly jewel is also having a potential signal right here. It's getting the light blue color, the cyan color, and it is also above the slower moving oscillator here. So ultimately, it is not supported by the DMI right now, which would be like perfect, but it is building one nonetheless. So I do look at that as very, very relevant, as that one has been really fucking good on the weekly as well. And then if we want to take it one step further, I actually don't even have this chart up, but we can just go over here. We can go to weekly and we can go to weekly CME. Weekly CME stochastic oscillator is also pointed up and is about to get back above the critical zone for the first time in a while, and also has a bit of bullish divergence right there. As long as Bitcoin, again, this already happened obviously last Friday, but it will continue to the upside. The pivot was met above 18,600. So all of these things kind of working in confluence with each other, I do really think gives the Bulaw's something to look forwards to here in early November. Here's the thing though, one of the biggest indicators that I really look at coming into the end and then beginning of a new month is the accumulation distribution indicator, as you can see right here. And this indicator has been really fucking good in getting macro shifts in direction for Bitcoin. It's not gonna like time things to the exact moment, but it gets the overall shifts in macro trend incredibly fucking well. And there is something that is potentially very interesting going on here, coming into November. And what is it? Well, let me first explain this indicator. So the indicator is right here, accumulation distribution. And basically all of the macro shifts in direction for Bitcoin have been met by the slope change of this indicator within the extreme conditions for both sides. So if it's green and it's turning over here from a positive slope to a negative slope, there's your bear market starting, same thing over here, and vice versa for the downside to the upside with the downslope turning into an upslope. And I'll just mark these off for you so you can see very, very clearly, and then also see on the chart as well. It's not going to be, I was going to say it's not going to be perfect. I mean, it's pretty fucking good, I would say. But for example, the reason why I say it's not perfect is because, coming into the Rona dump over here, it actually did change the slope, like literally in February. So that was like 1 month before. But coming out of that, you can see that Bitcoin, had a green month before that, and then it started to turn up right here. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but pretty fucking good. If we were to put it on a line chart, I think, I think that this is about as good as it's going to get, really. Anyways, let me go back to my normal candlesticks, dildos, and talk about why this is actually important right now. Shout out to Mr. Gritters, by the way, for pointing this out. I wasn't going to check into it until today, but basically it is this. A couple things. First and foremost, the slope of the current month, that being October, has drastically reduced. It is basically flat right now. It's like 2 degrees negative, but this is what we do expect, before it ultimately shifts. Similar to what you saw back on over here. Oh, whoops, let me actually just pull out. Yeah, right here. This was coming in from April, May of 2020. That was coming out of the Rona dump, of course. Similar to over here as well, you see the slope drastically reduce, and then the reversal does indeed happen. Not only that, but you can see that there is a nice green horizontal line right here. What does that essentially represent? It essentially represents the general area where we've seen all of the downside reversals turn into upside reversals on the macro. So I haven't marked these off with the green vertical bars. They obviously happen, well, actually, I mean, a lot of them happen like quite close to the actual low, and perhaps that was the actual low, you know, that we saw, or at least a major low that Bitcoin could work off of. Now, if I'm giving my personal opinion about what I think is going to happen, if Bitcoin does get, or if the accumulation distribution indicator does get a positive slope coming into November, yeah, Bitcoin very likely rallies. We'd probably see, you know, this signal over here turn up, this signal over here turn up. You know, they're all going to work together basically. And Bitcoin's probably going to go on a massive tear, as well as all major markets, I suspect. I would say, however, that I would be very, I'd still be cautious long term that, you know, after like a few month rally, or maybe even a rally similar to what we saw back on over here in 2019, things probably do come back down again. Maybe not exactly making like a significantly new lower low, or maybe even putting in a higher low as well, but coming somewhat reasonably close to our current lows. You know, let's say maybe somewhere between like 25,000 to like 15,000. But that would be much later. That would be probably in like the back half of 2023, if I had to guess. For right now, this is probably the most interesting one to me if I'm going to be looking at the macro for long term, just shifts in direction, because realistically, Bitcoin's been going down for basically a year straight here. I mean, there's been like one semi attempt at a monthly bounce. You know, would it be relevant, or would it be unreasonable to say that, you know, Bitcoin probably does get an extended bounce coming off these levels here, and then if it's going to come down, you know, it happens later. You know, I do think that that'd be rather reasonable, to be honest with you. Anyways, I think that's a good place to leave off on this video. I did not include the Dixie analysis, but it's the same thing as before. If you want to check it out, yesterday's video is still very much relevant on this. Yeah, still think this one comes down further as we let volatility indicators cool off. Still long term, it's fucking bullish, but but over the next month or two, probably does come down a little bit more. All right, sweet. That's a good place for me to be leaving it off. I forgot to talk about the damn quant program, of which, first and foremost, there have been some interesting questions about it. Just check out the FAQ on the website there, as that'll probably answer all of your questions. Definitely view that before, you know, ever buying anything, like whether it's our stuff or anywhere. But also, I would say about the quant project is that the price will be raised in November 1st. It will come with added value. We're going to be having a Discord channel, maybe even a couple more strategies included as well as more live trade videos. So that's a good place for me to be leaving it off. Yeah, take care. Much love. See you hopefully soon.